You're live, Natasha.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Natasha Bibioff. I am a human services instructor here at Fresno City College. And I also co-facilitate the MSW intern program that's housed within the social sciences division, also on campus as well. Today, I wanted to talk with you about hope in uncertain times. So let me go ahead and share the screen with you, my PowerPoint. Is the PowerPoint up? Can people see the PowerPoint? Let's see. Is it in a slideshow view or is it in a reading view? Can you see my slides on the side also? Okay, let me try to change that as well. There it goes. Okay. Is that good? Technical difficulties already. Can everybody see it? Just give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Okay. So again, hope in uncertain times. I'll start with this meme that I found online. If you're not able to see it, I'll read it. The first character says, "Aren't you terrified of what 2022 could be like? Everything is so messed up." And then the second character says, "I think it will bring flowers." And the first one says, "Yes, why?" And then the second one says, "Because I'm planting flowers." So as I was thinking about doing presentations for Flex Day, I sort of thought about how I was feeling about the next semester, how I was feeling about the new year. And this pretty much meme sums up how I was feeling about the new year. And unfortunately, I was the first character. I'm terrified, everything is so messed up. There's not a lot of, I didn't have a lot of hope. So I started to think about hope in that sense, and how could I start to get more of it? How can I be hopeful about the coming semester when there's so many things that are left uncertain, so many things are unknown. So as the academic that I am, I started researching hope, and this is how this presentation came about today. So I will be sharing what I learned throughout the winter break on how I can sort of shift my thinking about the coming year and the coming semester to be more hopeful. So with this meme, I hope that we can build or plant more flowers as we're looking forward. Some things to keep in mind as we move through the presentation is, as we're talking about it, how is this material going to apply to your own life? How can you implement some of it with yourself and also with your students? Our students are in the same boat that we are typically, right? Or a little bit, or have other circumstances that might impact them as well. However, they are probably low with hope as well. So we want to make sure that we're not only fostering hope for ourselves, but also passing that along to their students or whoever we work with in our capacity on campus. Have an open mind to the material. Some of it might not resonate with you. And so the stuff that doesn't resonate, just leave it there. Not everything, all the suggestions are going to work for you, but some will, and some will for your students as well. And recognizing there's no shame in where you are. So if you're not feeling hopeful, I wasn't feeling hopeful. And again, this is why I started to think about this presentation. And so so the goal is to be able to be a little bit more hopeful or have a plan for hope moving forward from this presentation. So the things that I'm going to share with you today, we'll start with the goals and objectives for this presentation. I'll talk about a little bit of definitions, excuse me, around hope, the benefits.
Natasha, I'm going to interrupt you right there. Mm-hmm. We're seeing your presentation screen. So do me a favor, go to see that where it says display settings at the top of, and click that little arrow and then switch. Swap presentation.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, sorry about that.
Perfect,
That's what I
thank
was
you.
trying to figure out at the start. All right, so we'll talk about the benefits of hope, and then there's a triad of hope, impacts to hope that happen with us and others. We'll do some measuring of your own hope, and then we'll talk about how you can foster hope for yourself and others. And then we'll take questions or comments or reflections. And questions, comments, or reflections, you feel free to share throughout. If you're compelled to share, I will pause the recording so that your share is not going to be recorded and posted online. Okay, so again, feel free to share as you're compelled to. So the goals for this presentation is to gain a better understanding of hope, and then objectives that you will understand and reflect on your own level of hope, and then create a plan for this coming semester or this coming year, however you choose to apply the material. So when we talk about definitions of hope, a simple definition of hope from the dictionary is to want something to happen or be true and think that it could happen or be true. So hope has that dynamic of we want this to happen and it can actually be true. It involves activity, a belief that there's a pathway, so that there's a way to our desired outcome, or what we're wanting to see happen. And then lastly, the perceived capability to derive pathways to desired goals and motivate oneself via agency thinking to use those pathways. So we'll talk about more of that concept moving forward in the presentation. But again, definitions of hope, to have an understanding, is hope is not just wishful thinking or positivity or optimism, because optimism and positivity, while that's great and that's helpful, it doesn't have a way to achieve what you're wanting to see moving forward. And hope does. Hope includes that with your vision of your future, or your vision of moving forward for the semester, we'll say. So it's not just, again, positive thinking in that sense, but it includes ways to achieve what you're envisioning, and includes the mental capacity or the willpower, if you will, to be able to achieve that. And those together is hope. So some benefits, some documented benefits of hope is there's better outcomes in academics. Research Shane Lopez was a big researcher in hope, and he found higher GPA in elementary school students that he studied, and students with the same intelligence that had a higher level of hope got better grades than students with a lower level of hope. So hope impacts almost all aspects of our life. If we have a high level of hope, we're going to do better in athletics, we're going to have better physical health, we're going to take better care of ourselves, we're going to have probably better social supports, a longer life, less depression and anxiety, and potentially a lower risk of cancer. So this is all research and evidence-based in terms of the benefits of hope. So one thing that when I was doing the research that struck me is that it's better outcomes in academics. And that's what we are trying to achieve or help our students achieve in our classes or on our campus. And so if we're able to have hope and we're able to share that hope, or let our students know how to gain hope for themselves, then they'll do better in whatever their goals are, their educational goals especially, and in life. So when we look at hope, a lot of the research, Snyder was he sort of started the hope research trend. He came out with hope theory. And this is how I conceptualized hope theory from the reading that I did. And it includes goals, way power, and willpower. So all of those together make hope? And I'll talk about what each of those means as well. So goals, again, are any objects or experiences or outcomes that we imagine or desire in our minds. So goals, when you're looking forward to this coming semester, what are you hoping is going to happen? What are you wanting to see happen in your semester? What are you wanting for your students in the semester? The second piece is willpower, and that's the driving force in the thoughts behind trying to achieve your goals. So it has determination and commitment, and those help us move us towards our goals. So you might see that and we're really energized about accomplishing our goals, or we're really passionate about moving ourselves forward. Willpower also includes mental capacity to be able to take barriers that might come up. As we all know, there's going to be barriers, there's going to be roadblocks in our semester, that it's just going to happen. We have really, again, uncertain times, and it's just going to play out how it's going to play out. So willpower anticipates barriers, it anticipates blocks, and we're able to say, I will get around this. The way power, lastly, the way power is the pathways. So this reflects the mental plans or the roadmaps that guide hopeful thought. So this is pathways to your goals. And so in all three of these in conjunction, have us create higher hope within ourselves. A lot of times when our students come to us, they have a lot of potential willpower, right? Especially if they're in college for the first time, they're really excited and they're demonstrating that in class. I'm really going to do this. I'm really excited about this. I'm so happy to be here. But they might be lacking in goals. They don't know where they're going, and they might be lacking in way power. So they might be lower in way power area. They don't know how to get there. They don't know how to gain to get to their educational goals. So in hope and helping our students create hope from themselves, if we're recognizing that, if we're asking them questions like, well, what are you hoping to achieve here at Fresno City or in college? And helping them sort of manage their goals, even if they don't know exactly what their major wants to be or what they're wanting to do once they graduate. But it could be something as simple as your goal is to start taking general ed classes or classes that interest you, right? So we're helping our students connect their excitement, which is the willpower, and their motivation to achieve and strive in college to goals. We're helping them figure out their goals. And then the way power is helping them figure out a path to those goals. So sometimes students come in with goals, right? They want to achieve a degree and they're excited about it, but they don't know how to get there. They don't know what classes to take. And so helping students figure that out, and that there's different pathways to their goals and achieving that. And the same thing for ourselves is right as well, right? If you're excited about and motivated for this semester coming up, but I'm not so sure what my goal should be for the semester, and I'm not so sure how we're going to get there, how we're going to achieve this goal for the semester, because things are so uncertain. So we're wanting to think about each of those dynamic or each of those areas of hope, because they will create greater hope. Also, if one of these areas is lacking, what happens to that motivation? If a student is not able to channel that motivation into a goal or to have a pathway to that goal, the motivation is going to wane, right? And that's when hope is going to diminish, is because there's not a combination of the three together. So we want to help ourselves recognize where we are on, and we'll be taking a scale. I'll help you reflect on where you are in your own hope, and we can help our students or whoever, again, we work with on campus, to be able to sort of reflect on the triad of hope. Okay, so again, the goals, Willpower and Willpower together in conjunction is what's going to help us have a higher level of hope. Some ways that are impactful to our hope levels, and this is something that we all have experienced potentially, and our students have experienced as well. So one of the things is you have lacked hope from the beginning. So they've experienced neglect, or you experienced neglect. You weren't nourished as a child. And so hopeful thinking is not something that you were around or exposed to. And you might not have that confidence and resilience in place to be able to have the willpower to move forward. A loss of connection. So a lot of times the loss that we might experience, some examples are divorce or death and change in general. And change is something that we've all experienced in the last couple of years with the pandemic. And a loss of connection within that can impact our hope levels. And that was something that I was seeing, like I shared at the start, was my level of hope was low for this upcoming semester. And I really wanted to figure out what I can do about that, because there are things you can do about that, which we'll talk about again coming up as well. So we can experience loss of intangible things like our identity, something with our identity. And when we don't seek assistance, potentially professional assistance to help with grief challenges or loss, then hopelessness can set in. So these are all things that can impact hope. Victimization, if they were abused, if you were abused or belittled as a child or even currently, it really takes a hit to your willpower in terms of your mental capacity to be able to believe in yourself and through the challenging times. It also speaks to unfair treatment from prejudice and discrimination, so racism, sexism, all the kinds of isms that belittle people in our society takes an impact on our hope. And then lastly, burnout. Burnout is the overwhelming of tasks or things that become unmanageable. We don't feel like we are able to complete our responsibilities. And then if burnout continues, we start to have a negative and cynical view of the world and about others as well. And it leaves us feeling really defeated. And I think that a lot of us coming from this pandemic, the amount of changes that we have had to endure in the last couple of years have really taken an impact on our view of the world and potentially have led to burnout. And so we want to recognize these in ourselves because we want to make sure that we're addressing them in order to increase our levels of hope. Is there any questions so far?
I don't see any, Natasha.
Okay. So let's see. So I want us to measure our own hope, okay? So if you humor me in doing this for yourself to sort of measure and take a inventory of where you are on the hope scale and where you measure with your own current hope. So this is a scale implemented or thought of by Schneider again. And so each statement, if you just number on a paper 1 through 8, and then you will see the numbers definitely false, mostly true, and definitely true. So put the coordinating number to each of those statements. I energetically pursue my goals. If it's definitely false, you'll put a 1 there, etc. So I will pause just to give you all a few minutes to be able to take this scale. And this scale is, the statements are for where you are currently, not where you have been, right? Has everybody had an opportunity to complete the scale? So if you total your 8 statements, so add up the numbers from 1 through 8, the numbers that you put in each statement is going to be your overall hope score. So that's all of your hope combined. So add the numbers you wrote for each statement together for one score, and that's your overall hope score. And then I'm going to, in the next slide, I'll talk about what the scores mean. So your willpower score, that area of score is your added responses to the 4 odd number statements. So if you add statement 1, 3, 5, and 7, your scores for those statements, you will equal your willpower score, which again is the mental capacity to get through barriers, to be motivated, to work towards your goals. And then lastly, the Willpower score is your added responses to the 4 even numbered statements, 2, 4, 6, and 8. So if you add those statements up, you will have your Willpower score, which is Willpower again is pathways that you have to get to your goals or get to where you're wanting to go. And this, there was a question about how we can sort of implement this material into our curriculum. And this hope scale can be used for students, right, to measure their own hope as well. So we can sort of gauge where they are. And the willpower and Willpower scores are going to help us figure out what they might be low on and what they might need to increase their hope. So what do the scores mean? The hope scale. Yeah.
Can we get the questions that you send us? Can we get that on email?
Yes.
Or put it in our chat, we can copy it.
Oh yeah, sure. Let me go back and do that. That's good.
I think this is really helpful for students.
Actually, Susie, can they have a copy of the PowerPoint? I'm not able to copy and paste it, I think, without messing up the slideshow. I'm so sorry.
Absolutely. Natasha, if you send it to me afterwards, I'll make sure that everybody who was in the session will get a copy.
Okay.
And just as a best practice, I post all the PowerPoints from Flex Day on the Flex Day professional development work groups SharePoint site. So you can also find it there, but I'll send it to everybody here.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. It's, I don't want to mess up the thing. I thought I could just copy and paste, but yeah, so you'll have a copy of it, which will be helpful to if you're wanting to do this with students as well. So again, what the scores mean, the hope scale scores, the overall scale, it is from 8 to 32. Generally, the higher on the scale, the more hope you have, or the more hopeful thinking you have. The average for that score is around 24. So if you have scores around 24 for that for the overall hope, you usually think in ways that are hopeful. So if you are lower or higher, that is higher again is more hopeful thinking, and lower is less hopeful thinking. Again, lower than 24 probably do not typically approach things with a hopeful mindset. And I want to again reiterate what I said at the beginning, is there's no shame in wherever you're at. So it is just a sort of, it's a measure to sort of say what you might need to address. And awareness is the first step in that. And so we want to be aware of where we potentially need to work on, and what, again, we can help our students work on. Lastly, the willpower and waypower subscales that you came up, those scores can range from 4 to 16, and the average for those scores is 12. So the subscale scores close to 12, it suggests that you have a solid foundation of hope. And a lot of times people might score high in 1 or lower, and there's all kinds of combinations that can come about. So any questions about the scoring? And then I'm going to go on to some questions you can consider when you're thinking about or reflecting on these scores. Any questions about the scale? All right, so questions to consider about the scale. Were there differences in your waypower and willpower scores? So noticing the differences in what your scores were. What does the scores tell you about your level of hope in each of the areas? Were your scores what you expected them to be? Did you expect them to be higher? Did you expect them to be lower? Or are they where you thought they might be? Any surprises in your scores? Do you feel your scores accurately reflect your current level of hope? Do you think it was a accurate level? And then what level would you like to be? Again, it's sort of considering, okay, well, I scored low on waypower, I'd like to be higher, I'd like to be around the average score, et cetera, or higher on that. So just the scale, again, is meant to recognize the areas that you might need to increase your hope in, including if it's your overall hope. Yeah, hope should be, or self-reflection is definitely, Steve agreed, that should be an ongoing process. And so with this said, before we move on to how we can start to foster more hope, would anybody like to share their experience with the scale? And I can also pause the recording.
I wanted to share something. Let me just put my video. You don't have to pause.
Okay.
Like a lot. Like, I just wanted to say that the anxiety, like I'm very anxious, like on the what ifs. But one of the things that happened the last, couple years due to the pandemic is I was able to actually rest. And also because of that, I was able to, I felt like my willpower, it's one of my most successful year. But I remember the time that I was a student of Fresno City College, and that time there's no pandemic, but I was completely broken. So I was able to now have a balance. I think you sharing this information give me the ability to kind of always go back to my roots as a broken student, so that when I become when I teach in front of my student, that I can channel those feelings as well. And then these questions have given me a great reflection right now, that even though the pandemic is wild, like this is one of my successful year, and I didn't realize it. I know it is, but I didn't realize it until I answered those questions. But at the same time, it gave me ability to go back and understand my feeling as a broken student back in the day, because some of my students are in that position right now.
Mm-hmm. So you found that you had a high level of hope currently, but you were able to see maybe where your thought patterns were as a student, and you can relate to students currently.
Yes, by understanding my own feelings through the questions and my own hope scores. Mm-hmm. It made me realize that this is the time that I was born for, is to become valuable for my student as a hope meter machine, and also as a giver of hope. Mm-hmm. Because if I remember, this makes me cry. I remember being a student in Fresno City College when I just had a baby. I lost my job through like not even my own fault, and then have a almost a fatal accident in 41. And I remember being a student and sitting in my business class. But now that my hope is so high, because now 20 years later, I could see, like, I'm 40 now, I was 20 back then, like things change. And so I think as a teacher, we need to understand that all the things that we went through is actually to give hope to our next generation. And as a teacher, we have the power to do that because we do have the access to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, exactly. And the same thing happens with us, a lot of us and our students as well, is that things just keep piling on that take that impact on people's willpower, right? That motivation to sort of go through the barriers, and that there's going to be a lot of barriers. How do we be able to address those as we move forward? How do we help our students move forward in that as well? Somebody had their hand raised, I think I saw for a second.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing as well.
So this measuring your hope survey basically forced me to be real with myself, because I wanted to answer definitely true. But the way it was worded and all, if I was being real and honest with myself, I couldn't say definitely true. So it's like where I wanted to be, but no, let's get real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sort of forces you to recognize where you're at. Some of us may not have recognized, well, yeah, my hope is tanking right now, so it's good to sort of see that. And me answering these questions 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I would have had high hope, right? I was very motivated, et cetera. But as things come on, especially again, the pandemic really took its toll on a lot of us. And so hope started to wane, and figuring out where we were, because, that's the whole reason for this presentation, is I didn't want to continue moving forward like that. So recognizing where we're at so that we can move forward and address it. Thank you for sharing that. Chia, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, Natasha, thank you for a great presentation. I have a question on, as I was looking and going over this, the hopes theory that you were talking about, and it made me realize or think about, another about, the basic needs of the students, especially during this difficult time where, maybe sometime, having shelter over their head, it's even an issue, right? So I'm thinking about, all the homeless students that I come across, or students who don't have the basic needs. And I wonder, how are you going to be addressing how we can work with students who, who don't even have the basis to believe that there are hopeful situations for them. And I think as faculty, there are times where we're gonna come across situations where, our students are really hopeless. And I think that so are you gonna also providing like those kind of strategies or tools for faculty when we are working with students who are in a hopeless situation?
Yeah, so that's That's a great question, and that's a perfect segue to how we can foster hope in ourselves, and how we can foster hope, help our students. And again, it goes back to the goals, the willpower, and the way power, right? Those combination that make up hope. And we can't have one of those areas and be lacking in the other one, because again, our hope, our overall hope will wane. If we have goals, but we have no willpower or no pathway, way power to get there, we don't know how to achieve those goals, our hope is going to diminish. Before I move on with the fostering of hope, is there any other comments or questions about the scale that we did? All right, so let's go ahead and move on to some things that we can do again to foster hope within ourselves and within our students. So the first one is goals. And when we're thinking about goals, there's a lot of different things that come into place along with goals. And Chia, I will keep your question in mind as we're moving through this, because people that have those challenges that impact our hope severely, like the ones we talked about at the start, right? Abuse or victimization or burnout. Part of that could be homelessness. Things that really impact hope need to be addressed before we can, or as we are increasing our hope. Okay, so it doesn't have to be totally separate. It can be in conjunction with. So maybe I'll just briefly answer your question now. So if somebody is homeless, right, they don't have their basic needs met, we need to help them get connected potentially to resources, or connect them with somebody who can get them some resources to be able to manage that. And when we get to way power, I'll talk about how, if professional help is needed, that's something that should be obtained, right? Or you should be pursued, is if you are feeling that sort of burnout. And we'll talk about that when we get to way power. Okay, so just a sort of preview or short answer to that question. So to focus on goals. So when we're thinking about goals, we want to make sure that when we're setting a goal, it's something that we actually want to do, or that we are wanting. Goals can be influenced by our society, by our gender roles, by what your spouse wants for you, and numerous other reasons. But when we're setting goals in connection with hope, in order to have higher hope, we're wanting to make sure that the goals are mostly ours. There is going to be always some influence to that, but ultimately, if you're not interested in becoming a doctor, you're only doing it because your parents want you to be a doctor, you're not going to have high hope moving forward in your life, right? So really trying to own the goals that you are, or the vision, right? When I say think about next semester, what is your vision? And you might be at a place where your vision or your goal for next semester is just to make it through the semester. And again, that's okay. Let's try to help you come up with a plan, a goal that's connected to way power and willpower for you to make it through the semester. Okay, so we'll talk about, again, way power pathways to get you through, but focusing again on goals. So try to become more aware of decisions that you're making in relation to your goals. We make a ton of decisions every day. And so really asking yourself, is this decision, and it might be automatic that we're doing stuff, are these things helping me get to my goal, or is it taking me away from my goal? And these are things that you can talk with your students about as well. Are you taking the time to think about your goals and to set goals? Are you stating your goals in a positive way? I'm sort of jumping around on the screen. Are you stating your goals in a positive way? So instead of saying, I don't want to become sick, you're saying what you want to do, right? I want to stay healthy. in a positive, so you're framing your goals in a positive sort of way. One of the exercises that I came across that you can do for yourself or you can do with your students is brainstorm your goals. So in different areas of our life, examples are relationships or friendships, our work or career, we might have different goals for each of those areas. So you can, on a piece of paper, write those areas in your life and brainstorm goals that you might want to achieve in each of those areas. You can help your students do this maybe with school, or if they are needing goals in other areas as well. And then once you have that list, you're going to rank your goals in each of those categories from most to least important. We oftentimes have like a brainstorm of goals that we want to achieve, but not all of them are important or ones that need to be prioritized now, right? So I'd like to do a lot of different stuff, but I need to get through the semester. And those other goals can still be your goals, but maybe they need to be future goals or longer term goals. So if you do this exercise in terms of ranking your goals, you can start to understand a little bit more about what is most important in the current time. So specify your most important goals with concrete and recognizable markers. How do you know that you're going to achieve your goals? So if your student is wanting to get a degree, they might need to start with a sub goal is to pass your class or to pass the biology class. Okay, and how are you going to get there will be the way, the pathways part. So have another person that you trust can check or discuss your progress towards your goals. It's always nice to share what your goals are with a trusted person, and so that they can help you. They can help you sort of check that, and is that going to be a realistic goal? And that's something that we can do with our students as well. Vincent, I see you have a question about more information about what I'm talking about. Did you have a specific thing that I mentioned that you want more information about? We're also, in terms of goals, we're making sure that we're allocating enough time for important goals. Okay, so if we have a goal that is important or that's prioritized in our life, we want to make sure that we're allocating that time to it. And we can help our students do that as well, right? Students don't always recognize how much study time is needed to pass a class. We might help them understand how much time it's going to take to get to their goal. Set up your life so you're not interrupted by outside demands. Again, that's maintaining that focus for your goals. And as we are having more solid arranged goals in conjunction again with willpower and way power, your hope is going to increase. Any questions about this goals before we go on to willpower? Would anybody like to share any sort of thoughts you had as I was talking or going over this on how you might apply it for yourself or for your students or whoever else you work with on campus? Bruce, I see your hand up. Go ahead. You got to unmute.
Natasha, it seems to me that there's a lot of expressed worry with regard to children not learning right now because of the interruption of their education. I look at it at a slightly different perspective. I think the learning that's going on right now is tremendous. We're learning not necessarily about my special interest or yours, but we're learning an awful lot with regard to how we treat one another, what we believe in, how we would like to be governed and the like. And I'm wondering if there's a place in this advocacy of hope for recognition of the fact that hope is inevitable if you have a certain openness in terms of your own mind, and recognize that things may be difficult from time to time. You may not have an answer to a particular problem that confronts you, but the reality is that we are now and always are going through periods of really intense learning, which we don't really even recognize.
Mhm. Yeah, Bruce, thanks for sharing. Good points in that. And that's a perfect segue to willpower, right? What you're talking about is willpower, is that sort of mental capacity to still work towards goals or important goals, even when barriers come up, right? And what you talked about in seeing the learning in your current situation is part willpower. It's recognizing, wow, this pandemic has really taken a toll, has really become a barrier to a lot of people's goals. But the willpower part of that, again, is that you anticipating roadblocks will happen and you don't know that how they'll happen, and recognizing the, I don't want to say positive, but recognizing what you can take from the situation or challenging situation, recognizing your strengths in that situation and what we can potentially be learning about the situation. So willpower speaks to what you're talking about, Bruce, in that. So because all of this can come into play. So with willpower, we're wanting to build our mental capacity for challenges, for things that come into play. One of the things with willpower is our internal dialogue. And this happens a lot with our students, really, is what are our students, or what do you tell yourself when challenges come up to the goals, or challenges that come up to your daily situation? Do you say immediately, oh, I can't do it, I'm never going to do it? I often talk about with my students, when they sit down to write a paper or to do an assignment for a class, when you're stuck, what sort of thoughts are going through your mind? And so part of building up the willpower section or area of hope is recognizing how you're talking to yourself and how you're taking in all that information. How are you taking in barriers? How do you, again, your inner dialogue? One of the exercises that you might be compelled to do, or that you might do with your students, is taking an inventory of your thoughts for a week, or start with a day. You will be surprised, and I actually do this in one of my classes for my students as one of their assignments, is that they are to watch their thoughts and write down their inner dialogues throughout the day. And what they found is they're often shocked about how many times in the day they're thinking negatively, especially around stress or barriers that come up. And so again, recognition of that inner dialogue is the first step in order to address that and to start to shift that. The expectation shouldn't be, I'm never going to think negatively again, but we can start to be kinder to ourselves in that, and noticing, oh, I'm really saying I can't do this. You're recognizing, in order to build willpower, you're recognizing what your strengths are. You're recognizing when you were successful in the past, when challenges came up as well, and you're building on those. You're able to, some other ways you're able to laugh at yourself, right? You don't take yourself so seriously, especially if you encounter some impediment on your goal pursuits. It sort of came up, that was, my willpower was really lacking as I was thinking about this semester. And the meme I shared at the very start really just hit the nail on the head for me. I was that pessimistic person. I was constantly saying, well, that's not going to work this semester because this is going to happen, or this is going to happen. And really had to start to shift that and say, well, what am I going to do if this happens, right? And that speaks to the way power. But I have to have that sort of willpower, the mental capacity again, to get through that barrier, to know that I will get through, and I can help my students get through that. as well. I think Keelan, I saw you in the chat. Do you have a question? Or is that
no, that was actually clapping on something that
okay?
But one of the things that I think is, we are all evolving, whether we're young or getting older.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, there's a reason they say wise old woman and wise old man. We've got to go through all the crap to get to the point where we say, that wasn't really as important as the emphasis I placed on it.
Mm-hmm.
And, positivity, look, I grew up in a family where my dad came from the school of hard knocks. My parents lived through the Depression. My mother was 45 when I was born. So I had a different perspective than a lot of my friends growing up. And my dad had a quote for every occasion. We were up to our ass in aphorisms on a daily basis. But I'll say this about it. There's a lot of truth in that. Life isn't fair. You don't get something for nothing. The baddie doesn't always get what we conceive to be just desserts.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, who was a far more positive person than my dad, and I used to just want to shriek when I was a teenager in my early 20s. I say, how can you just be there and be so calm about things? And she'd say, now, dear, things always work out in the end. Maybe not how you anticipated, but things really do work out in the end. And fast forward 20 years or 40 years. And I thought, she's right. Is my life what I thought, hoped, dreamed when I was young? No. But when I take stock of my life, and I think it's important that we all do this, and I don't have all the answers. I'm not perfect. I'm not correct all the time. I'm not correct a lot of the time. But it's one of these things where I think I compare what I thought, what I wanted to where I am in my life. And I have to look back and I go, I've had a fabulous life, despite disappointments, despite tragedy. Nobody gets through life unscathed.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, who was very pragmatic, unlike my mother, who was very bohemian, he used to give us quotes. And one of them I remember very clearly from being about 5 years old. I was complaining or whining about something. And he said, I cried because I had no shoes until I saw a man who had no feet.
Mm-hmm.
And that really puts things into perspective. And I think with the students and with each other, we have to say, if you look at that overall long-term goal, it can be massively overwhelming. Take baby steps, celebrate the small. And I know it's like trite because we hear this so often. But fact of the matter is, it's really true. And it's so easy to become negative with all the COVID and, nobody's certain what we're going to do. None of us have been through this before. We all want things to be, quote, normal, whatever that is, whatever that's going to be. But something I've noticed, particularly at the college, yeah, we've got problems, massive problems. Same thing with the district. People are becoming kinder to one another because we have, through telecommuting and so on, had a little more time to reflect and had a little more time to realize, frankly, for me personally, or for us, for my family, what is important? And I'm going to be quiet now because I've gone on longer than I expected.
Yeah, I thanks for sharing. It speaks to the willpower, right? And I like how the sort of affirmations or those sayings that your parents had sort of stuck with you, right? And that's helpful to you when you're thinking about your willpower moving forward through challenges. We want to help our students and help ourselves come up with something that's personal to themselves, right? So that might be, personal affirmations. It might be a religious pursuit, a spiritual sort of grounding for people that builds this willpower. So willpower is very unique to the person. And again, we want to explore that with ourselves, and we want to help our students figure out what's going to be helpful to them to be able to get through the challenges. And willpower is not necessarily being positive all the time, right? You can be negative and saying, this really sucks, but the willpower part of that is, and I'm going to keep going anyways. And that's what we want to help our students and help ourselves as part of that hope package is this might really suck and I hate where this is right now, but I'm going to get through it. And that's what really speaks to the willpower part of that. So enjoy the process of getting to your goals instead of just focusing on final attainment. Here is where you want to encourage your students to take care of themselves physically, because that's going to contribute to their mental capacity or willpower to accomplish their goals and increase their hope. So healthy eating, adequate sleep, and exercise are always do a person good. You can use relaxation and stress management techniques to replenish yourself. And again, this is going to be personal to the person. This is where spiritual aspects can come in, or religious, again, pursuits. And then lastly, seek professional assistance as needed. So if you are finding yourself unable to sort of get out of that mental or emotional hole, if you are genuinely burnt out emotionally, then you're wanting to seek professional assistance. And it's not something, again, that there should be shame attached to that. And for our students as well, there's no shame in that. You're recognizing where you're at, and you're recognizing something needs to shift in that. And professional assistance can be needed in some circumstances. So therapy, group therapy, self-help groups, all of those can be helpful in increasing a person's willpower. And then lastly, our final of the triad of hope is Willpower, or pathways. So we're looking at our goals, and then the Willpower is how we're going to get there. And the willpower that we just talked about is pushing us through that. So Willpower, it's helpful if we can break those long range or long-term goals into steps or sub-steps. And it's, again, helping our students, like the example I used earlier. You know, if your student has the goal of graduating, the first step that they need to do is pass your class. Maybe even before that, they need to understand how to study and how to break up the course material into doable chunks, right? Begin your pursuit of a goal by concentrating again on that first sub goal. So we want to help our students understand that, because they a lot of times don't understand the pathways that it's going to take to get to their goals. For my own experience in college as well, I knew I wanted to get a degree, and I was motivated to get a degree. Being a first generation college student, I didn't have willpower because I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z when you're applying to college or when you're going to college. So again, that was a missing piece of that. And if we don't help our students recognize that or gain that, then their hope is going to diminish. And so if you're noticing, as you're talking with your students, and you're noticing they're not really understanding the pathway to their goal, but they're motivated for it, you want to connect them again with somebody who can help with that pathway, or you can explain that pathway to them so that they have that missing piece of the hope puzzle. In your mind, you can rehearse what you will need to do to attain your goal. So telling yourself these, X, Y, and Z are the steps that I need to take. You can rehearse scripts for what you would do if you encounter blockage, right? So in terms of our students, if their friends are asking them to go out and party on a Saturday night, and they need to study, or they need to focus on an assignment, right? So that they can practice a script to say to their friends, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to, study, or whatever it will be. So anticipating those barriers or those blockage, and having something prepared in order to address that. Sorry, this was. If you need a new skill, so some of us might need to develop new skills in order to continue on a path towards our goals, or to increase the hope. We were thrown into the pandemic, and we all needed to all of a sudden do everything online. So there was a big learning curve with that. And we had to be able to adjust to that. And that again was the Willpower, right? How are we going to, we were on one path, and all of a sudden, boom, the pandemic happened, everybody's going online. We had to go take a different path. And Willpower, part of Willpower is understanding that there is more than one path to get to a goal. So our goal is generally as faculty or people on campus is we want our students to succeed. And in the Willpower, our students succeeding was us being in the classroom teaching them. With the pandemic, we had to shift that. So our goal still is we want our students to succeed, but we had to take a different path there when the pandemic hit. So the Willpower to that is understanding that there's not just one pathway to goals, and you might have to shift and you might have to adjust. And that's something that we want to stress with our students and for ourselves as well. The stuff that we're going to need to do when we are back on campus this semester, I don't particularly want to do all of it, but in order for us to be on campus with our students, that's the path we're going to have to take right now. And so adjusting it and being comfortable with that, or getting comfortable with it, is something that again is going to contribute to us helping us have higher hope for moving forward. Any questions on Willpower? Or any of the triad of hope? So lastly, looking forward with hope, I put this meme in. So we have opportunities, 360 opportunities, 65 opportunities in order for us to be hopeful, to move forward. And so I hope that you were able to get some ideas for yourself, get some ideas for your students or for those who you work with, to sort of understand where they might be at and what you can do to help them be hopeful. Because if we don't have hope, or it's waning, it makes for our lives not very comfortable or not very good, and our goal is not achieved. So yeah, so those are things that can contribute to hope. Is there questions or comments, thoughts, or reflections about the presentation? That pretty much concludes my presentation. Linda, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Natasha, I just want to thank you. The chat's now disabled, so thank you this way.
Okay.
I want to thank you for the presentation and all the helpful information. I really appreciate it. So not in addition to helping personally, it was definitely information that we can share with students or other people in our daily life. So thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Good. I'm glad I was helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Chia?
Hey, Natasha, could you also share what are some of the resources on campus that students can utilize, especially psychological resources, or you talk about, seeing professional help. So are there also some free, no cost resources for students on campus? Yeah, so there's a lot of different resources that we can refer our students to. Especially if that's, like you said earlier too, if they have housing insecurity, if they're having some mental health challenges, all of those are going to want to be addressed in order for hope to sort of continue for them. On campus, there's students get access to psychological services through the psych services on campus. Referrals for that are online. Faculty and anybody on campus can also refer students to our Masters of Social Work interns within the social sciences division, and they can actually help students connect with resources on campus and in the community. So that's a good start if
if you have somebody who needs to be referred, you're welcome to reach out to me and I can get you that information. There's also a lot of different services depending on their circumstances on campus. There's Hope, I think it's called Hope. The housing initiative program that is happening on campus. There was recent funding for that for students who are homeless or housing insecure. There's the food pantry if they need access to food, right? So there's a lot of resources to connect them to. And I'm happy to refer or to have you speak with the MSW interns who can help gather those resources for you for other people as well. Does that answer your question, Shia?
Yes, thank you, Natasha.
Yeah, the Fresno City webpage is a good place to start. Just they have resources listed on there, which is helpful. Any other questions or comments or thoughts about what you heard today or how you sort of thought about it as we went on? Has this material sort of changed or might change your outlook moving forward for this year or for this semester?
Yes.
I can say it has. I plan to incorporate some of this in my class. I really like the layout and the whole idea of checking in on people, their wellness, you know. So a lot has transpired this year, and I think it's great to incorporate some portion of this in your classes, you know, just to give a self-check for the students.
Mm-hmm. Good, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, our students, we're in the same circumstances again as our students. And so, yeah, hopefully it's been helpful to sort of think about how you can move forward into the semester and how we can address students who potentially their hope has waned or they're hopeless, and how can we help them start to build that up. Any final comments or again, reflections or thoughts? Questions? I don't have anything else to present, so, but we still have a few more minutes.
I just wanted to say thank you, Natasha, for the presentation. It was helpful. I think kind of for me, remembering that my students are looking at me as kind of a role model. So if I'm hopeful, you know, if I bring a good attitude into the classroom, that helps them see like, oh, okay, I can do this too. So it's a good way to start the semester. So thank you.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. And that's an important point, right? In social work, I tell my students, you know, who are going into social work, is sometimes our clients or the people that we're going to work with don't have hope from themselves, but we can help hold that hope for them, right? So if they don't have the willpower right now to believe in themselves, somebody believing in them can help them start to believe in themselves. And so that's a really good point, Michelle, and I appreciate you sharing that. We can be the holders of hope until they're able to get hope for themselves. Others? We have 5 more minutes, I see.
Do we know when they will be posting up the PowerPoint? Because I would like to kind of form create a Google form out of the hope survey or the hope scale that we took earlier, and kind of want to do that so I can kind of get a, you know, an overall look of where students are at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can send the PowerPoint to Susie as we after the presentation ends. And then Susie, I think you said you can send it out at some point and we'll post it.
Absolutely. I'll send it out to everybody in this meeting. It won't be until after Flex Day concludes,
Okay.
but probably tomorrow morning. I can get that out to you so you can have something for Monday if you'd like.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you, Natasha. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to Mercedes and Janae, our wonderful interpreters. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Flex Day. Next session is at 11. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. If there's any questions, feel free to email me as well.